if we go down this road, how much will your utility bill go up? How much gas prices will go up? We need to actually talk more honestly about that.
If we spend $50 trillion, or however much it takes, to make the United States carbon neutral by 2050, how much will it lower world temperatures?
Senator, that depends on the rest of the world.
Do you
to create harmonized incentives to reduce
emissions. Do you believe
emissions.
in the tooth fairy?
No, sir.
Do you believe in the Easter Bunny?
No, sir.
Do you believe that Jimmy Hoffa died of natural causes?
No.
Deloitte predicts the differential between being responsible and reckless about climate could sum to more than $220 trillion globally between now and 2070. This is just the beginning. It will certainly get worse, much worse, particularly if warming exceeds 1.5 degrees. We are on a bad trajectory. It's time for us all to wake up and face the problem before coastal cities flood with water or Southwest cities can't get water. Last year, the ocean absorbed the equivalent of 7 Hiroshima bombs detonating every second in the ocean. Every second of every day for the entire year, 7 nuclear detonations worth of heat into our oceans per second. Water temperatures in Florida have hit records reaching as high as 101 degrees. That's not the air temperature, that's the ocean temperature. That's actually the recommended temperature for a hot tub. Indeed, that's the midpoint of the jacuzzi company's recommended range for its hot tub temperatures for healthy adults. Now, doctors recommend that children under the age of 5 avoid hot tubs over 95 degrees, and pregnant women are advised to stay out of water once it gets much above 100 degrees. So the ocean off Florida is almost too hot for many humans. Sea levels are rising and the rate is accelerating. That's a scientific fact. As homes and businesses in coastal communities face more frequent sunny day flooding and wetter and more violent ocean storms, more homes will be underwater, both literally and figuratively. Think of coastal cities flooded with water and Southwest cities that can't get water. Think of a Salt Lake that is virtually gone and blowing dust over Salt Lake City. Almost exactly 5 years ago, I sent around this binder to all of my Senate colleagues in which I compiled some of the most compelling warnings about the economic risks associated with climate change. Last week, I sent your staffs an updated version of the binder. Here it is. As you can see, the warnings keep piling up. Have fun with the light reading. Look at our national debt. One thing that stands out is how much of it was incurred as a result of exogenous shocks to the economy. Consider the 2008 financial crisis, which blew up the financial security of families and businesses across the country and reduced government revenues for a decade. Consider the pandemic. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget estimates that the federal response to the pandemic, which brought COVID under control, protected families, and jump-started our economic recovery, will add $5.5 trillion to our deficits. Plenty of epidemiologists warned that the country was woefully unprepared for a pandemic. Now, we have all these warnings. Warnings of crashes in coastal property values as rising seas and more powerful storms hit the 30-year mortgage horizon. Warnings of insurance collapse from more frequent, intense, and unpredictable wildfires. A dangerous interplay between the insurance and mortgage markets hitting real estate markets across the country. Inflation from decreased agricultural yields, massive infrastructure demand, trouble in municipal bond markets, stranded assets, and a carbon bubble. The most dangerous risks are called systemic, meaning that they will cascade out into the broader economy as the mortgage problem did in 2008. And it's big. Some of the gravest dangers of climate change, which we could head off today, come to pass years or decades out. Rhode Island's coastline will be gone, reshaped into an archipelago by 2100, you say. Who cares? What's that? It's an eternity. Well, almost exactly a year ago, I became a grandfather for the first time. Baby Vera, God willing, will be alive in 2100. When I look at her, I'm looking at that future. Walk by any elementary school. The faces you see on the playground, God willing, will be alive in 2100. How will those little ones remember our less than greatest generation? We owe it to kids on playgrounds all across America to pay attention to get this right. By the end of this series of hearings, if we hear these expert witnesses, if we treat their testimony as our headlights, then our path, I hope, will be clear. Thank you, and let's get to work. Mr. President, this is the 289th time that I have come to the Senate floor with my increasingly battered time-to-wake-up chart to stir this chamber to act on climate change. Since 2016, I have been talking about the zettajoule. The zettajoule is the measure of how much fossil fuel emissions are heating up our oceans. In this season of extreme, record-smashing heat touching all 50 states, it is wild that elected representatives in Washington still choose to insulate themselves from reality, a reality measured in zettajoules. A zettajoule is a number almost beyond comprehension in its size. 1 joule, Joule, is our standard unit of energy, and it applies to heat energy. A zettajoule is 1 joule with 21 zeros behind it. It is a truly massive number. In a 2019 Time to Wake Up speech, I reported that more than 9 zettajoules of heat energy was being added to the ocean annually. Since then, I've come to the floor with an updated number. Our oceans are absorbing around 14 zettajoules of excess heat every year. Let's put that in context. The total energy consumption of all humankind amounts to about 1/2 of a zettajoule of energy per year. That means that for the fossil fuel component of that 1/2 of a zettajoule of energy, we pay the price of 14 added zettajoules of heat into the ocean every year. Said another way, we load into our Earth's oceans every year nearly 30 times the entire energy use of the entire species on the entire planet. That is a big magnification. If this is the zettajoules of excess heat absorbed into the oceans every year, that dot is the average annual energy consumption of the human species on the planet. For the price of the fossil fuel component of that, mankind's entire energy consumption in zettajoules, we suffer that load of heat energy going into the oceans. Almost too hot for humans means definitely too hot for many ocean creatures, particularly ocean corals. Coral reefs matter because they support 1/4 of all known marine species. Florida has the largest coral reef ecosystem in the continental United States, the third largest living barrier coral reef in the world. If you don't care about creatures and only care about money, well, Florida's protected waters contribute billions of tourism dollars to the Florida economy. All of that is in jeopardy in this heat. According to NOAA, when temperatures reach 1 degree Celsius, or about 2 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than normal, corals cross what is called their bleaching threshold. That is where they turn white as they evulse the living creatures that keep them alive, and that is a step on the way to death. That is bad news, considering that temperatures around Florida have been running 5 degrees above normal. And the longer this goes on, the more trouble corals will have recovering. Almost exactly 5 years ago, I sent around a binder about this thick to all of my Senate colleagues, in which I compiled some of the most compelling warnings about the looming climate economic crisis. I have just recently updated it and shared it with all of the Budget Committee members. It's now more like this thick, as the warnings just keep piling up. These warnings come from central bankers, economists, asset managers, insurance companies, investment banks, credit rating agencies, and leading management consultants, folks with a lot of credibility when it comes to economics, finance, corporate risk, and their effect on government spending and revenues. Folks who often have a fiduciary obligation to get this right. The U.S. has nearly 13,000 miles of coastline. 40% of our population lives along the coast. More than $1 trillion worth of residential and commercial real estate is coastal. And for most American households, their greatest wealth is their home. First Street Foundation, whose CEO testified at this morning's hearing, examines flood risk. It's what they do. And their examination shows significantly increasing risks to residential properties over the next 30 years. And Rhode Island does its own flood projections, and they show similar risks. Just 2 weeks ago, a study found real estate exposed to flood risks was overvalued, i.e. the flood risk had not yet been taken into account, by up to a staggering $237 billion, with the worst property overvaluations along coasts. And of course, Florida, with all of its coasts, is the prime liability. The study warns that, as a result, coastal real estate values may plummet, and that can cascade into systemic risks for the mortgage market. Freddie Mac, the mortgage giant, has made very similar warnings about coastal property values. Their former chief economist, who also testified at this morning's hearing, has said, and I'm quoting him here, "The economic losses and social disruption are likely to be greater in total than those experienced in the housing crisis and Great Recession." Anybody who was here through that 2008 housing crisis and the recession that followed knows how sobering that warning is. And it comes from that collapse in coastal property values, triggered by difficulty in getting mortgage and insurance, with its 30-year lead time, collapsing values, and then cascading out into the rest of the economy.